But the Constitution establishes two great types of taxes. There's an indirect tax and there's a direct tax. Indirect taxes are like a sales tax. They're taxes that you pay indirectly. You buy a pack of cigarettes and you pay a tax. You don't send the money to the government. You know, the cigarette company charges you, builds it into the tax, or the store, charges it, and the money gets sent to the government indirectly. You don't send it there, and the government doesn't even know who you are. They don't care who you are. They don't know who bought that pack of cigarettes. They get the tax. And you don't have to keep any records. You don't have to swear under penalty of perjury that you paid the correct amount of taxes when you bought your cigarettes. Nothing. It's very efficient. And the only constitutional restriction on indirect taxes is that they have to be uniform, meaning that they have to be the same all over the country. So if the federal government wants to tax cigarettes, the tax has to be the same in California as it is in Maine. They can't just set them at different levels. So they have to be uniform. The other type of tax is a direct tax. And a direct tax is basically when you take a check and send it directly to the government. The government sends you a bill and you send them the money. An example is a property tax, right? The state taxes your property every year. They say you own this house. Here's how much you owe because you own this house. They're taxing your property. There is no federal property tax, only states. Why? Because only the federal government is bound by the constitutional requirement to apportion a direct tax. Now, what does it mean to apportion a direct tax? It means that each state has to pay the amount of the tax in proportion to its population, which means the government has to first decide how much it wants to raise. Let's say the government wanted to raise $100 billion in a property tax. Well, if California is 10% of the population, well, then 10% of the tax has to come from California. But the problem there was if you had a poor state, that property tax rates in that state might be much, much higher in order for it to raise its share. And what happened was the reason that they put this in, right, is they wanted to prevent, too, the smaller states or the poorer states from trying to drain the wealth of the wealthier states by taxing things that they didn't have. But the rates, the real problem is the disproportionate rates. So, for example, in income tax, if an income tax was still viewed as a direct tax, income tax rates would be higher in some states than in other states, which would be extremely unfair. And so there are no direct taxes because it's too difficult to impose them. And the reason for that is because the founding fathers didn't like direct taxes. They liked excise taxes because they said they're self-correcting as to abuse, meaning that if they raise the tax too much, you don't buy the product. But direct taxes are by their nature oppressive because you can't avoid them. They're just taxing you directly. The only reason the government was even given the power to levy a direct tax was for war. And in fact, that's what the framers thought. They thought that direct taxes would be reserved for a war. Well, now we don't even bother. We just print money and create inflation to pay for wars.